Hello everyone, my name is Robert, and welcome back to my continuing coverage or review of the Savage Worlds game system / game framework. Today we're going to be going over character creation and advancement. Now, Savage Worlds can be played a huge number of ways, including companion books and setting books, so before you really start to design your character or come up with a concept, you need to talk to your game master. They can tell you what's going to be expected in the game, what skills might be required, what races are available, and a lot of other things which are important to know before you begin. Our game master has told us we're going to be running in a 1940s noir style game with a few additional races mixed in and a bit of steampunk technology. Sort of Shadowrun, but earlier. To that end, we're going to make ourselves a Dick Tracy style character. If you don't know, Dick Tracy is a cartoon detective who is well known for investigation and solving problems with violence when necessary. Our character is going to focus on basic investigation skills, things like noticing clues and doing research, and have a decent skill with their weapons. So let's grab ourselves a character sheet, link in the description if you want to follow along. And as you can see, this is pretty extensive, but also very empty at the moment. So we're going to start filling it in pretty quick here. First up is our race. Now, the Game Master has said that there's a number of other races available in this game, and Savage Worlds has the option of making your own race, but for today, we're going to stick with the human race, because it's one of the more populous races in this setting, and it's a good starting point for this tutorial and this character. Now, races will give you different things. The human race gives us a pace of 6, which is our speed in combat. This is pretty average for a speed. They're also going to give us one free edge that we can purchase later. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Other races will give you different speeds or extra attributes and skill points. Some races will even give you specific skills or bonus starting points on specific skills and attributes, letting you push beyond the regular limits. So now that we have our race, we can talk about our hindrances. Perfect characters are boring, and hindrances help to round out your character. Plus, there's an added little bonus for taking hindrances that we'll talk about in just a second. Hindrances can be either minor, like mean here, or major, like blind, or can have a scaling degree depending upon how extensive the hindrance is to you. Some hindrances are purely mechanical, affecting dice rolls or options that you can take, while others are roleplay only, meaning you'll have to commit to that hindrance in character. You can also talk to your game master if you want a hindrance that isn't listed, and they can work out the level of it. Our character is going to take the minor hindrance of bad eyes, because I like the idea of steampunk goggles on my character, and goggles and glasses can negate bad eyes. We're also going to take loyal, because I feel that we're going to stick close to our friends, and heroic, since I imagine our character is going to be the impetus for a number of our adventures, jumping into danger to save the innocent and dragging the rest of the party along with them. Now, as I mentioned, hindrances don't just hold you back. Each hindrance you take gives you a number of points. Minor hindrances giving you 1, and major hindrances giving you 2. You can get a maximum of 4 points from the hindrances that you take. That's not saying you can't take more than 4 points worth of hindrances, you just can't get more than 4 points from the hindrances. You spend your hindrance points a number of ways. For 1 point, you can add an extra skill point in your character build, or double your starting money for your gear. For 2 points, you can add an extra attribute point, or buy an extra starting edge. We're going to buy an extra edge, so we'll get 2 to start with, and we're going to add 1 additional skill point, so we have a few more skills to choose from. We're going to touch on this in just a moment. We'll spend our last point to double our starting gear. Now that we've got that done, we'll move on to our attributes. There's 5 of these. We have agility for jumping and shooting, smarts for knowing and thinking, spirit for wisdom and willpower, strength for lifting and hitting, and vigor for not dropping dead. Each of these starts at a d4 unless your race bumped it, and you get 5 attribute points to spend. Each point you spend bumps the die type by 1 from a d4 to a d6, a d8, d10, and finally a d12. You can't push above a d12 unless your race specifically says so, or your attributes started above a d4 before you were adding points to it. As you can see here, everything's a d4 with our 5 points to spend, and we could spend the points on all of our attributes, putting us at a d6, which is a pretty average character build. But our person needs to be a little bit smarter, being an investigator. And I feel that a reliance on guns rather than fists to solve problems may limit their strength somewhat. So we'll knock our strength down by 1 and bump our smarts up by 1. Now that our attributes are done, we can move on to our skills. You have 12 skill points, plus any you might have gotten from hindrances, and you have 5 innate starting skills. These starting skills are athletics, common knowledge, notice, persuasion, and stealth. Note how all of our skills here have an attribute assigned to them. This is the related attribute for that skill. The attribute will limit the skill's growth to an extent. For one skill point, we can buy a new skill at a D4, or we can bump one existing skill by one die type up to its attribute limit. Once it reaches its limit, we'll have to spend 2 skill points for each die above its limits, up to a max of a D12. Personally, I like to purchase skills before I start bumping any of them, so I at least have the skill that I can bump later on as I increase in rank and ability. I know we're going to need to get into places we're not supposed to, there's going to be a bit of combat, and as a detective, I ought to be able to research things in addition to just noting clues. So we'll pick up shooting, thievery, research, and fighting. This spends 4 of our skill points, so we've got 9 left. We'll spend another 7 points to bump common knowledge, notice, persuasion, stealth, shooting, and research up to a D6. Now, I've talked with the Game Master, and they have informed me that there's going to be a good deal of combat in this game, and I have prided myself on being sort of a guns-ho detective, so I'm going to spend my last 2 points to bump my shooting to a D8. This is 1 die above the agility, which was a D6. That's where the last 2 points spent comes in. Now that we've got our skills all done, we can move on to our derived stats. There's 2 derived stats, the first being parry, which is your fighting die divided by 2, plus 2, and if you don't have fighting, it's just a minimum of 2. Parry is sort of the anti-getting hit in the face stat. It's the stat you want high if you're going to be in a lot of fist combat or fighting swords or baseball bats. I'm a shooty character, so hopefully I won't be in close combat too often, but this will at least help me to dodge a couple of blows. Next up is our toughness, which is the vigor die divided by 2, plus 2, and it can be augmented with armor, but there are some weapons that will just ignore armor, so it's important to know who's hitting you and what they're hitting you with. We have a vigor die of D6, which becomes 3 plus 2 for a toughness of 5, which isn't bad, but we'll see if we can't augment it with a bit of armor later on. Now we can move on to the edges. These are the feats or special abilities of the Savage World system, and there's a lot of categories that these fall into, so we're going to run through them relatively quickly. The first group are background edges. These are things like attractive or fame, the kind of thing that your character would have inherently or have built up over time before the game started. Notable among these edges is the arcane background edge, which is required for any kind of special power, be it magic, psionics, weird science, aka steampunk in this instance, or other special abilities, even faith-based ones. The next group are combat edges. These are all the edges and special feats that are focused on getting you through combat or making you deadlier in combat. Things like double tap, dodge, and harder to kill make you more effective in taking down your foes and more resilient in taking damage yourself. Leadership edges start with command and have additional ones like hold the line. These edges are all designed to work with the NPC extras around you. They're there to help you guide and motivate them, to point them in the right direction and make them more effective either as a workforce or a fighting force or some other force for your favor or good. Power edges all require that arcane background edge I mentioned previously, and are all focused on enhancing your powers and abilities. These are things like new powers, power points so you can cast your spells more often, and even higher end abilities which focus your specific brand of arcane background, like magic, and make you more effective as a spell slinger or scion. Professional edges are the kind of skills and abilities that you would get from doing a specific job every day. Be it an acrobat or a thief, there are certain things that you do that you're just going to do consistently that you'll then be better at for doing it consistently. Social edges help you in all those instances where you probably shouldn't just shoot your way out of the situation. Things like humiliate and connections can really help you to get out of sticky situations. Weird edges is the category that anything that didn't fit into any other edge falls into. Things like danger sense, champion, and even animal companion can be found here in the weird section. This is a section which is usually pretty heavily policed by the Game Master, so if you're going to take a weird edge, you might want to check with them first to make sure that it's an edge you can take. But these edges are a nice way to make your character stand out a little more than they might normally. Finally, we have the legendary edges. These edges are blocked away until you reach the legendary rank, which is sort of the highest level you can attain in Savage Worlds. These help you to push past your natural limits, become a master at weapons, certain skills, or even push your own physical attributes beyond anything that should be humanly, or whatever race you are, possible. For our character, we're going to take the Investigator Edge, which gives us some bonuses on Research and Notice, and will help us out when we come to do investigation in general, along with the Deadshot Edge, which will give us additional damage when we draw a Joker. Finally, we get to our gear. In a standard game, you get $500 for adventuring gear, though this assumes that regular things like clothing, room and board, transportation, are trivialities that your character naturally has access to. It's important to talk to the Game Master before you start picking equipment to make sure that you're buying stuff that is adventuring gear, unique and specific gear to your character, not just everything that you own. This way, you don't end up as a character who is well armed, but essentially naked and broke. Our character doubled their starting gear, so we're going to start with a decent amount of gear to go with. We'll pick up a leather jacket, nice trench coat style look, I think, a police revolver and some ammo, shotgun and a variety of ammo for hard and soft targets, a pair of handcuffs, some lockpicks, toolkit, a camera with some film, rope, crowbar, and let's throw in some formal clothes just in case we have any of those special social events we have to barge our way into. So now that we've got our level 1 character done, we can talk about what happens when you level up. In this system, a level up is called an advancement. You don't have experience points, you just gain advancement whenever the Game Master feels like it. And advancement is about the same as 2 hindrance points. You can do a number of things with them then. You could spend them to buy 2 skill points. This would let you bump existing skills by 1 die type below their attribute limit, buy new skills at D4, or bump 1 skill above its attribute limit by 1 die up to a maximum of D12. You still can't break that limit. You can also buy 1 attribute point, which will let you bump an attribute die by 1 die type up to D12, though you can only do this once per rank, or once every other advance once you reach the legendary rank. And the final option, and the one taken by most, is to buy an edge. As you advance, you'll record your advances on this side sheet here. It's important to make note of them so that you don't lose track of if you've taken your advancement or not. Note how I raised my strength for my first advancement, then raised my notice and common knowledge with my second, and finally bought the streetwise edge. I was having difficulty tracking down people in the black market. Notice the letters off to the side? This is our rank. The first 3 advancements you get will still be in the novice rank. The 4th one will progress you to seasoned, then veteran at the 8th, heroic at the 12th, and legendary at 16 and up. This completes our character and advancement. Join us next time where we'll go over trait tests, combat, and wild cards. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.